Hello, Hickory Squirrels. It's Mr. Tillman here again with another weekly musical experience for you. We're going to be getting out in nature today, so I hope you have your walking shoes. But even if you don't, that's okay too. Everything we're going to be doing in this week's weekly musical experience, you can do right from your own home. This week, we're talking about soundscapes and all of the different places that you can get inspiration for music. So, what is a soundscape? Well, a soundscape is a word for all of the different sounds you can hear in one place. You may not realize it, but you are always surrounded by a number of different sounds. And sometimes it can be easiest to notice this when we're outside. So let's head out and get an example of a nature soundscape. And here we are outside. Let's see what type of sounds are going to be in a soundscape in nature. So that was an example of a nature soundscape. But what if we can't get outside right now? Well, let's hear an example of what a soundscape inside might be. If I listen carefully, I bet I could hear a lot of different sounds in my home. What do I hear? I hear the washing machine running. I think that's the fridge. I think the faucet in the kitchen sink might be dripping a little bit. Oh, and I put some food in the toaster oven. Let's hear that sound. So we've heard what a nature soundscape and an indoor soundscape might sound like. But what does that have to do with music? Well, it turns out that composers, that's a word for people who write or compose music, have been using the sounds that they heard around them to inspire the music that they wrote for a very long time. And we're going to talk about a few of those composers. Claude Debussy was a composer from France, and a lot of his music was inspired by the sounds of water. Let's listen to a little bit of his piece Reflets dans l'eau, that's French for reflections on the water, and see if we can hear how this piece was inspired by water sounds. So I hope you could hear how Debussy was inspired by reflections on the surface of water and dripping water to write that piece of music for piano. Another source of inspiration for composers has been animal sounds. A composer from Russia named Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov was inspired by one specific animal to write this piece of music. Then there was a composer from Germany named Franz Schubert, who tried to use a piano to imitate a spinning wheel. A spinning wheel is an old-timey tool that they used to create yarn for sewing with. A little bit like this. The higher, faster-moving piano notes are supposed to imitate the wheel spinning and spinning and spinning. while the lower sounds from the piano are imitating the foot pedals of the spinning wheel. Now, people have been finding inspiration to write music in the sounds around them for hundreds of years. But even before then, there was the idea of musica universalis, or the music of the spheres. And that's the idea that everything around us is actually creating music, even planets and solar systems and the universe. People like Pythagoras, Galileo, Kepler, and Isaac Newton were scientists and philosophers. That means they loved to think about stuff. Thought that the planets were resonating or vibrating and creating musical pitches, just like the way that the strings on a ukulele vibrate to make their sound, or the bars on a glockenspiel vibrate to make their sound. They thought that each of the 5 planets that we can see with just our eyes, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, plus the Sun and the Moon, and the stars, each vibrated and created their own musical pitch. And all together that would create an octave, which sounds like this. And it turns out that the philosophers and scientists were right. Planets do resonate with musical pitches. They're just so low that we can't hear them with our ears. And depending on where the planet is in its orbit, the note that they resonate with is going to change. So the planets have an interval of musical pitches that they create. In music, an interval is a word for the distance between 2 pitches. So let's hear what the planets will sound like played on a glockenspiel so we can actually hear it with our ears. And one last really cool thing for you to hear. Modern day scientists have been able to record sounds in space. So here's a recording of what our sun really sounds like. So I think it's pretty awesome that music really is all around us. And we're going to use that idea for this week's weekly musical experience. Our weekly musical experience this week has 3 parts. The first part is you're going to find your own soundscape. Remember, soundscape is the word for a collection of sounds that we hear in one place. So you might find a soundscape in your house, or in your yard, or maybe in a park if it's safe to go to a park nearby you. The second part is you're going to write down all of the sounds that you hear in your soundscape. And the third thing is you are going to explain how one of those sounds could be an inspiration for something musical. You can submit this to me as a video, or as a recording, or as a picture, or just a written response. And make sure you do that by next Tuesday. All right, have fun and be safe with this week's weekly musical experience, and I will talk to you again next week.